Well, good morning, everyone. It is so good to see your faces. It's good to see the mask on your face, but it's really good to see you guys with us today. We have missed being with you in person because relationships are a really big deal for us here at Mosaic. We just do not believe that we can do life the way that we need to do life until we're in relationship with one another. And so you just being back in the room is a big, big part of that. We've got an exciting series that we're kicking off today. It's a 2-week series. And then after this 2-week mini-series, we're jumping into a series called Detours as we continue our study in the book of Acts. And I believe that that is a series that is going to be highly relevant to our life given everything that we're experiencing in this really weird season called 2020. Well, today we are kicking off a new series, and it's called Generation Next. And I really do believe that this is one of those series that will play a huge part in the future health of Mosaic Church. From the very beginning of this church, it started about 12 years ago, Mosaic always had a vision of reaching the 180,000 people who live along the Mississippi Gulf Coast who do not know Jesus and they do not have a church home. And what you hear in that original vision statement is a desire to have a reach and an influence that is really, really wide. We want to influence people all along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, from the Louisiana border all the way over to the Alabama border, right? We want to influence people all along the coast. But we don't just want to have a wide reach. We also want to be a church where people have a really deep faith. In fact, I want Mosaic Church to be a church that is full of people who have had all kinds of spiritual breakthroughs in their lives. And I really do believe that this series that we're kicking off this morning is one of those series that can take us in that direction. So I want to start just by talking a little bit about our ministries here at Mosaic and about your life, just to help you understand how important this really is. There was a season in my life when I was actually not a pastor, believe it or not, okay? I had been a pastor right out of college, and then there was about a 6 or 7 year window when I wasn't a pastor, and so I was very much walking in your shoes. I had gone back to school full-time. I was also working a full-time job. I was married, and I had 2 kids. And while I wanted to be involved in everything that was going on in my church, sometimes life said it's just not possible for you to be involved in everything that's going on in the life of the church. And that became really, really important for me as a pastor because it gives me an ability to understand how busy your life really is. Now, that being said, I look at a lot of the ministries that we have around Mosaic Church, and I long in my spirit for you to be a part of those ministries because I really do believe that they will add value and they will even change your life in an incredible way. And so I look at like student ministry, for example, and I go, I want every single student from middle school until the day they finish high school to be involved in our student ministry because it gives them an avenue to have relationships that are really, really important. Because what I know about middle school and high school is it's really hard to live out your commitment to Jesus Christ when you're doing it alone. And so what you need in your life is you need other students who are also living out their faith in Jesus Christ on that campus. You got to have relationships with them in church, but you got to carry those relationships with you into the school. But you also need a relationship with another godly adult in your life during those years. Someone other than mom and dad, right? Because I know my kids, 15 and 18, dad doesn't know anything anymore, right? And so what a student needs in their life is not just a relationship with other students, but a relationship with another godly adult who is going to reinforce the commitment to Jesus Christ during some of the most defining years of their lives. I want that for our students. I want adults to be in community group. I really do, because I really do believe that doing life alone is deadly. I really do believe that we are better together. And because of that, I want people in community group because that's where relationship happens. Again, relationship is such an important part of this series. I want people to be a part of our recovery ministry. I really do. I know that most people in the room, most people watching online this weekend, they're walking around with hurts, habits, and hang-ups. They need healing in their life. They need healing in their life so they're not just carrying all kinds of baggage from one relationship to the next, that's dragging them and everyone else down. And I believe that our recovery ministry is a place where people can experience healing in their lives. But one of the things that I know from previous experience in my life, one of the things that every pastor on the planet eventually discovers is that people typically give God or typically give the church about 1 hour out of their 168-hour week every single week. And whether pastors like it or not, it's just a reality that we've had to accept and deal with as we try to lead people into a deeper commitment to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so because of that, what we do here at Mosaic is we put a ton of effort, energy, hard work, sweat, and time into making the 1 hour that people give us as powerful as that 1 hour can possibly be. If people are going to give us 1 hour, it's probably going to be on Thursday night or our Sunday morning services. And so we look at that 1 hour and we go, that's the 1 hour when it is most likely over the course of a 168-hour week for a person to realize their need for Jesus Christ. That's the 1 hour where someone may find the encouragement or the hope that is missing from their life as they come to their breaking point. That's the 1 hour when someone's marriage could be saved. That is the 1 hour in their life where they have a change in perspective and they start to see things in their life the way God sees things in their life. That could be the 1 hour where they start to think about things in their life the way God thinks about things in their life. And it proves to be a major game changer for them. But as important as the weekend service is, I want to say this. It is very dangerous for you to put all your eggs in one basket. Your faith, your spouse's faith, the faith of your children is so important that it is an extremely dangerous practice to put all of your eggs in just one basket called the weekend service. I really do believe that it is entirely possible that the greatest threat to a person's faith may never be addressed in the context of a weekend service. I want you to think about that today. It is entirely possible that the greatest threat to your faith, it may never be addressed from this stage in the context of a weekend service. But I do believe that if you are in the right relationship, then it could be addressed immediately. And that's how important relationships really are. The greatest threat to your faith, it may never be addressed from this stage in a weekend service, but it could be addressed immediately if you were in the right kind of relationship with someone who could talk to you about what's going on in your life, or who could talk to you about what is threatening your faith or the faith of your family. So let me give you an example. About 3 years ago, I'd been living on the coast for a very short period of time, okay? And I got an invite to come and speak at this event. It was an event for a group of ladies in town called MOPS. If you don't know what MOPS is, it just stands for Mothers of Preschoolers. And so basically what happens is we were at another building in town, and all of these mothers of preschool-age children, they come into the building, they drop their little rugrats off on one side of the building. Those kids destroy that part of the building, and moms go to the other side of the building where they get a much-needed break, okay? It's a little time for self-care so that moms can be the very best version of themselves that they could possibly be. So on that particular day, what they were doing is they invited a group of men to come and sit on this panel, and the room was filled with women who could ask us any question that they wanted to ask. So there were a couple of pastors on the panel, there were some former school administrators on the panel, a couple of other people. And so we sat down, and there was this one lady in the crowd who addressed her question to the pastors on the panel. And her question was this: what do you advise me to do if my husband won't go to church with me? Now, I want you to think about that question, and I want you to think about that family with me for just a minute. This is a mother. She's got her kids on the other side of the building, and she's got a husband who has no interest in spiritual issues, has no interest in coming to church with her. How long do you think it will be before the kids don't want to go to church because dad doesn't want to go to church? Now, I'm telling you, here at Mosaic, it would be later in life because what we see almost every single week is kids dragging their parents to church because Mo Kids and Student Men really is that fun, okay? Like some of you are like, my kids you've told me today, my kids are so happy to be back in church because they've missed it. But you and I also know that the day is going to come when their friends are staying out all night on Saturday night and they're sleeping all morning on Sunday morning. And you and I both know that it is a matter of time before those kids say to mom, why do I have to go to church if dad doesn't have to go to church? And so there's a dilemma in that family. And that dilemma, it is posing a very real threat to the faith of almost every single member in that family. And so the question becomes, what are the chances that the greatest threat to your faith will be addressed in the weekend service at the exact time that you need it the most? I mean, what are the chances that that family's going to show up? And I'm actually talking about the issue of fathers not wanting to go to church with their wives or with their children. And so there's a dilemma, and it poses a very real threat. In fact, if you've been around church, you see this all the time. For some families, it may be a dad or a father who doesn't really want to go to church. But for others, it's a different issue that's threatening their faith. It may be a question about the Bible or a doubt that they have that never gets addressed in the weekend service. It may be a temptation that's creating this internal conflict. Because if I'm giving into this temptation, then I don't feel right about being in church. And if the temptation's never addressed, then the internal conflict goes unresolved. And it's a whole lot easier just to stay out of church and continue in my way of life rather than dealing with that internal conflict. It may be a life experience for someone, and that life experience is so painful that it causes them to start to question God. They either question the goodness of God or they question the very existence of God. And so again, it leads us to that question of what are the chances that the greatest threat to a person's faith will be addressed at the exact moment when they need it most? And the answer is, it is very unlikely. And this is why so many people dabble in Christianity for a season and then they walk away and you never see them again. They don't deal with the threat that is being faced in their faith, and so they've put all their eggs in this one basket called the weekend service, and they just don't make it. And I just want you to know, it doesn't have to be that way. Because the greatest threat to a person's faith, it may never be addressed in a weekend service, but it could be immediately addressed if you are in the right relationship. See, when Jesus invited people to follow him, he was not just inviting people into a relationship with himself. He was actually inviting people into a relationship with a community of other people who were also trying to follow Jesus and live out their faith in him. And so that's what I want to talk about as we get into the final section of Acts chapter 15. You're going to see relationships really are the greatest way to grow a person's faith. Look at verse 36. This is what the text says. It says, sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back and visit all the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord, and let us see how they are doing. Now, a lot of people might read that one verse and think, okay, this is kind of the introductory verse of what's getting ready to follow. It's not an introduction. It's the thesis statement. Okay, Paul and Barnabas have been traveling around and they have been telling people in all of these different communities about their need for Jesus Christ. And after they've been doing that for a while, Paul gets this bright idea. Paul says we should go back and actually check on these people. We should see how they are doing. Why? Because Paul knows that life has all kinds of twists and turns. And any one of those twists and turns can put you in the ditch or wreck your faith. Paul knows that you're dealing with real temptations in your life. The Apostle Paul knows that there are life events that might cause you to question God or question His goodness. He knows that you're wrestling with real questions and real doubts, and you don't have all the answers, and you don't have all of your life together. He knows that you are going to run into very persuasive people who may talk you out of a need for Jesus or talk you out of believing the Bible. And because of that, he says to Barnabas, look, we need to go back and we need to see how they are doing. What's the implication of that statement? Some of the people are probably doing well, but some of the people are probably not doing well in their new faith in Jesus Christ. And so I need to ask you today, how are you doing? Or maybe the better way I want to ask it is, how are you really doing? Because I know that when people ask you, hey, how are you doing? Your natural response is, I'm good. Everything's great. We're doing fine. You know, everybody's getting along. We don't have the coronavirus. And you want to live in the shallows. But I want to ask you today, how are you really doing? You've been living in what is arguably the hardest year of your entire life. You've dealt with problems before, but you've never dealt with problems that lasted for 6 or 7 straight months. And it is eating a lot of people's lunch. It is stressing people out. I had to go to the doctor recently, and I had to tell my doctor, I'm struggling with anxiety, and I have never felt like this before. And my doctor said, you would not believe how many people are struggling with anxiety or they're struggling with depression. Why? Because this is a brutal year called 2020. And if you're not doing well, then what you often need in your life is you need someone who will look you in the eye in a relationship and say, hey, how are you really doing? And I just want to say as your pastor, if you're not doing well, I'm glad that you're not watching through that camera. I'm glad that we're in person where you can come down here at the end of the service after everyone else has left the building and you can talk about what's going on in your life with someone on this staff team, because we do love you and we do care for you. And what we know is that there is a very real danger when you're living in isolation. There is a very real danger when you have been living in quarantine, right? It poses some degree of risk to your spiritual health and your well-being. And so you need someone in your life who can look you in the eye. And listen, the reason you need it is because you weren't made to do life alone. And I'll even say this, you weren't even made to do life with your immediate family. You weren't. Because the men in your family are dealing with things that the wife will never understand. And the wife is dealing with things in her life that the husband will never understand. And so what you need is you need a community of believers of the same gender around you who understand what you're going through, and they can look you in the eye in the context of relationship, and they can encourage you and you can encourage them. Look, this is what they're doing because there's something special that happens when people get together. It's like those little charcoal briquettes. Have you ever noticed that when you put a charcoal briquette with a lot of other briquettes, they get really, really hot and they burn a little brighter? But if you want to put the fire out, all you got to do is spread those babies out and they cool off very, very quickly. Why? Because that's how God made them. And that's how God made you. God made you so that when you got around other followers of Jesus Christ, you will burn a little hotter and you will burn a little brighter. And so Paul is going to go back and he's going to check on these people. He's going to look them in the eye, not in the context of a weekend service, but in the context of relationship. And he is going to ask them, how are you doing? And if things are not going well, if there's an issue that needs to be addressed in their life that's threatening their faith, then it's going to be resolved best in the context of relationship, not in just a weekend service. Why? Because we know that relationships are the best way to do life because it's how Jesus did relationships. It's how Jesus did life. Jesus did life with 12 other people. He spent every day for 3 years with these 12 other men, and he spent time teaching them. He spent time helping them work through their issues. He spent time capitalizing on teachable moments that surfaced in the rhythms of everyday life, and he did for them what eventually he would expect them to turn around and do for other people. This is how Paul and Barnabas are doing life. This is how Jesus did life. And so Paul and Barnabas are going to go to these towns and they're going to check on these people. But before they go, something interesting happens. Look in verses 37 to 40. It says, Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. But Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. Now, this is not a passage that teaches us about the importance of church splits to make sure that the message of Jesus Christ goes to the ends of the earth. Instead, there's a powerful point here. And when you look at these two guys, Paul and Barnabas, they're both leaders. They both probably have strong opinions about things. And while they did have a strong disagreement, there is one thing in this text that they did agree on. And what they agreed on is that you don't ever do life alone. You always take someone else with you on the journey. It may be another adult. It may be someone from the next generation. It may be a student. But you do not do life alone if you are a mature follower of Jesus Christ. They agreed on what needed to happen. Someone needs to go with us. They just didn't agree on who it should be. And so they ended up parting ways. Barnabas takes John Mark, and Paul ends up taking this guy Silas and invites these two young men into a relationship with these veteran followers of Jesus Christ. Why? Because that is what spiritual maturity looks like. It's about investing in someone from the next generation. The ultimate mark of maturity, not just spiritual maturity, is getting to that place in your life where you're not looking for someone else to take care of you. Instead, you're looking to take care of others. And so Paul says, come on, Silas. I'm not doing this alone. I want you to come along on the journey with me. Barnabas says, come on, John Mark. Next week, you're going to see Paul investing in another young man from the next generation, a man named Timothy. They are doing for others exactly what Jesus did for his own disciples. They're living in relationship for the purpose of growing these young men up in their faith. Again, because that's what spiritual maturity looks like. So listen, a lot of you have been in church all your life. In fact, I'm just interested. Will you raise your hand? How many of you have been in church all your life? Put them up high. Okay, look at that. A lot of people have been in church all your life. Listen to me. Spiritual maturity is not about being in church all your life. Spiritual maturity is not about how many Bible verses you have memorized. I think that plays some part in it, but that is not all that it's about. Spiritual maturity is not only about how clean you live your life. It's not. Spiritual maturity is about accepting on the responsibility of taking care of someone else who's part of the next generation, who's a little further behind you in the faith, and saying, I'm going to invest in them to grow them up in their faith. It's what Paul did. It's what Barnabas did. It's what Peter did in the book of Acts. It's what Jesus did. Now, I don't care if you invest your life in developing someone else who already has faith in Jesus, or if you choose to say, I'm going to introduce someone to faith in Jesus that doesn't currently have a relationship with Him. It doesn't matter which route you choose, but we do know this: a person's faith grows best in the context of relationship, not just a weekend service. Now, if there's any demographic, if there's any age group or segment of our population that this matters most to, it is millennials. And I need you to hear that. Millennials are some of the most relational people on the planet. But listen, millennials also have some of the most negative perceptions of Christians and Christianity of anyone on the planet. George Barna recently did a study among millennials who do not go to church, and this is what he found about their perception of Christians and Christianity. He discovered that of millennials who do not go to church, 87% of those millennials see Christians as judgmental. 85% of millennials who do not go to church, they see Christians as hypocrites. 70% of millennials who do not go to church, they see Christians as people who are insensitive to others. In fact, one of the articles that I read said that millennials see Christians as people who eat their own rather than taking care of their own. They see Christians as people who gossip about one another, who judge one another, who backstab one another, and who eventually just wound and hurt one another. And while you may not like the way they see the Christian community or the way they see Christians, it's the way that it is. And what we also know is that God still loves them. God loves this next generation. We are a group of people who will love the next generation. We're going to care about them and their relationship with God. But in order to change the perceptions that they have, they will only change those perceptions in the context of a real, authentic relationship with a person who is genuinely following Jesus Christ with their life. In fact, this is found in a book called Unchristian, What a New Generation Really Thinks About Christianity. It was written by a couple of guys named David Kinnaman and Gabe Lyons. And in the book, they talk about what this next generation really thinks about the Christian community and how the church is supposed to help them overcome these perceptions. This is what they say. They say, it is encouraging from the Christian perspective that our research uncovered scenarios in which outsiders' experiences with Christians help to reshape their perspective about God and about Jesus. Rather than being unchristian, the Christ follower no longer seemed judgmental, offensive, and insincere. Meeting such Christians made these outsiders believe that becoming a Christ follower might actually have merit. For a few moments, they discovered that Christians think, love, and listen. The caveat here is that such interactions were rare. It was also uncommon for an outsider to have a complete 180-degree change of heart as a result of just a handful of experiences. People's reactions to Christians are not like a sitcom on television where everything is neatly resolved in a 30-minute episode. Do you hear what they're saying? A person's faith grows best in the context of relationship. A long-lasting relationship with a person who is genuinely following and living out their faith in Jesus Christ. Why? Because in the context of a long-lasting relationship with a genuine follower of Jesus, stereotypes get destroyed. In the context of a real relationship with an authentic follower of Jesus, they start to see that not every Christian really is judgmental, offensive, or insincere. When they get in a long-lasting relationship with other followers of Jesus, they start to realize, wow, there really are some Christians in the world who think with their brains. There really are some Christians in the world who listen with their ears or who love with their hearts. And the long-term relationship, not just a weekend service, but the long-term relationship starts to change the way they think about Christians and Christianity, God and Jesus. Now, I know that Kinnaman and Lyons are arguing that these experiences that millennials have with these kinds of Christians, they're really, really rare. And that's the problem. It doesn't have to be rare. It should be, and it could be, the regular experience that people on the Gulf Coast have if we would understand that faith really grows best in the context of relationship, not just a weekend service. And that's why I love what you see in Paul and Barnabas, because they're going to go into these towns and they're going to take other young men with them, and they're going to do relationships in a way that reveals that we really do love with our hearts, we really do think with our minds, we really do listen with our ears, and as a result, people all around them start to have spiritual breakthroughs in their life. Now, there is a problem in this story. And the problem is with a young man named John Mark. John Mark's commitment level is nowhere near where it needed to be. The text doesn't tell us exactly what went down, but it does tell us that Paul did not think it was wise to take him along because he had deserted them in Pamphylia. And this is not just the problem with this story, this is actually the problem with this approach to growing people's faith. A lot of people struggle like John Mark struggled. They don't have a commitment to the relationship that is required in order to grow their faith. So I wonder what it was with John Mark. Like, what was it that caused him to desert his relationship with Paul and Barnabas when they were in Pamphylia? Did he get spiritually lazy or apathetic? Was John Mark the kind of guy who said, I'm all in until there's a better option that is out there? Anybody know anybody like that? Like, you're trying to make plans for like next weekend and they're like, yeah, I think I can make it. But you know, in that statement, what they're really doing is they're saying, I'll be there as long as there's not a better offer that comes along between now and then. Maybe John Mark was that kind of guy. Maybe John Mark was the kind of guy who was all in, but the truth of the matter is he overextended himself because he had too many irons in the fire, too many commitments that he couldn't keep them all. Maybe John Mark is the kind of guy who was all in as long as it was fun. But when it's not fun anymore, I'm leaving because I'm shallow and I really just want to be a part of things that are fun for me. I don't want to do hard things. Right? Maybe John Mark's the kind of guy who is all in as long as he gets his way. But in the moment that Paul or Barnabas made a decision that he didn't agree with, in the moment that he didn't get his way, or in the moment that Paul pushed him a little too hard, his arrogance got the best of him, and he just said, you know what, I don't need this in my life. So he just walked away. I don't know what it was, but I do know that he walked away, and I know that in the moment that he walked away, a lot of progress in developing his faith was lost. It was very much like 2 steps forward and maybe 5 or 10 steps back. So much so Paul said, I don't want to have anything to do with him again. And so I got to ask you today, is there any John Mark in you? Like a lack of commitment to be in relationship with someone else who could grow your faith, or be in a relationship with someone else where you could help them grow their faith. For whatever reason, is there a lack of commitment to the kinds of relationships that we're talking about today? Because I really do believe that it's a very dangerous thing to put all your eggs in one basket called the weekend service. And so here's the deal. We're going to ask you to make a commitment to these kinds of relationships, but we're not going to ask you today. Because the last thing I want you to do is to make a commitment that you can't keep, or to make a commitment that you won't keep. It would be a waste of your time. Even worse than that, it would be a waste of someone else's time. But I do believe that the New Testament model of growing someone's faith is growing their faith, yes, in the context of a weekend service, but also in the context of real relationship where we're talking about life and we're talking about the things that grow our faith. So next weekend, when we wrap up the series, I'm going to ask you to make a commitment. Either sign up to be in a relationship where someone else can pour into you, or you can be a mentor. For all of you who raised your hands, I've been in church all my life. Man, I would love for you to take all that God has been teaching you over the course of the 30, 40, 50, 60 years that you've been on this earth, and then somehow turn around and invest in someone from the next generation. They are longing for it and they want it. Months ago, we had a meeting with 19 to 29-year-olds, had about 75 from our church that sat in the room, and they were crying for these kinds of relationships because they need spiritually mature people to walk with them and develop them in the practical sides of their faith. Now, I want you to know two things in closing. One, I would never ask you to do something that I haven't done myself. I have had many mentors over the course of my life. I've been mentored by a guy named Chuck Lawless, Scott Riggs, Oscar Morrison, Russell Taylor, and there's probably 5 or 6 others that at different points in my life, Dwight Mason, going to meet with Dwight next month, that they have spent time developing me and helping me in my life and in my faith journey. I would never ask you to do something I'm not doing myself. My wife has discipled 3 girls in this church for the last 3 years. We believe that this is the way that a person's faith really grows. Our new community group starts in just a couple of weeks. We believe that relationships really do matter. And so just hear me say that. I would never ask you to do something that we're not doing ourselves. We just absolutely believe this is the best way to grow a person's faith. The final thing I want to say today is that, today we've tried to help you understand that faith grows best in the context of a relationship. But know this, you don't just need a relationship with someone who's following Jesus. You need a relationship with Jesus himself. If you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, that is the thing that will change your life, and that is the thing that will finalize where you spend eternity. When Jesus showed up on earth, there were a lot of people who were disgusted with the religious establishment, and they were frustrated with what was going on in the temple. But when they met Jesus, when they heard his teaching, when they saw his life, he restored their faith. And so if you don't have faith in Jesus, that's where we want to start today. And then next week, we'll start the work of getting you into a relationship with another follower of Jesus so that your faith can continue to grow. Let's pray together. If you don't have a relationship with Jesus, right now, I just want to ask you to confess that to God. Right in the privacy of your own mind, just say, God, I don't have a relationship with Jesus. But God, I really do want one. And so today I'm admitting that I need Jesus to forgive my sins. I'm admitting that I need Jesus to lead my life. I need Jesus to be the source of my faith and to start the process of growing my faith in you. Probably a lot of us have been wandering away from our faith, and maybe today's just a day where God's brought you back to help you see what's truly important. If that's you, make sure that you've got the relationship with Jesus nailed down. If you're struggling today, I want you to know that we love you, God loves you, and we're here for you. If you need to speak with a pastor after the service, I'll be hanging out here at the front. Just let others make their way out, and you can hang around, and we'll be happy to talk to you about what's going on in your life, pray with you, get you into relationship with someone who can walk with you. God, thank you for teaching us from your word today. I pray that we would take it to heart. I know, God, that we have very busy lives, but I pray that we would understand just how important relationships really are. And I pray that we would make them a priority in our lives. And I pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.